Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be breaking down my week number 14 wide receiver start or sit decisions for the 2024 fantasy football season, going in depth through all 13 of the matchups on the week. It is important to note that there are 6 teams on bye this week: the Baltimore Ravens, the Denver Broncos, the Houston Texans, the Indianapolis Colts, the New England Patriots, and the Washington Commanders. But before we can get on into today's video, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you don't enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure you do leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. So without further ado, let's get into my week number 14 wide receiver start or sit decisions for the 2024 fantasy football season. We begin with Thursday Night Football, one of the best matchups of the week and probably the best Thursday Night Football matchup of the season, the Green Bay Packers at the Detroit Lions. Now, for the Lions, Amon-Ra St. Brown did not play his best over his last 2 games, and he definitely let us down. But even with a wide receiver 32 and wide receiver 27 performance in those games, you cannot abandon ship on Amon-Ra St. Brown. This is a man who scored a touchdown or more in 8 straight games from week 3 to week number 11. Do not hit the panic button just yet on Amon-Ra St. Brown, and honestly, I am not going to hit the panic button at all on him this season. This isn't the best matchup for a wide receiver, but last time these two teams played, he was the wide receiver 15, so I do expect a strong showing out of him as a top 6 wide receiver. Now, Jameson Williams has seen a uptick in targets, and they have been very, very solid ever since returning from suspension. But this really hasn't led to crazy production. At the end of the day, though, when it comes to Jameson Williams, this is a guy who has incredible upside on a week-in, week-out basis. He will always be in that wide receiver 3/flex range, and for me, this week, I got him as a middle-of-the-road wide receiver 3. For Tim Patrick, he should be able to see like 3 to 4 targets potentially in this game, but with him being so low down on the offense's hierarchy and with there being such a low chance he ends up actually scoring a touchdown, no one should be starting Tim Patrick. For the Packers, Jaden Riley-Reed had the Dolphins bending over backwards on Thanksgiving as the wide receiver 14. He had 3 receptions on 6 targets for 24 yards and not 1, but 2 touchdowns in that game with 1 carry for 23 yards. Now, at this point, he really does feel like he needs a touchdown to have a big game because the targets really haven't been there in a very high fashion in terms of it actually being reliable, right? The targets haven't been the most reliable for Jaden Reed. But when you consider the matchup here with the Lions defense getting plowed by wide receivers like a street in Toronto in the winter, as a team that allows the 4th most amount of points on a per-game basis to the wide receiver position, I do believe that Reed should be considered as a low-end wide receiver too. For the rest of the receivers in Green Bay, Romeo Doubs is still in concussion protocol and will not be playing in this game. Now, Watson is like Jameson Williams in the way that he can always have that huge game. But in reality, he isn't like J-Mo at all, because we're seeing Jameson Williams actually get a boatload of targets where Christian Watson's more than likely just going to get 4 a game. Now, the Packers have a zillion wide receivers on the roster, and even without Romeo Doubs, I just don't think playing Watson makes a whole lot of sense. Now, we will be seeing Wicks likely be the wide receiver 3, and even with him getting his highest amount of targets since week 7 last week up against the Fins, he was 4 of 5 for 30 yards, so there's no need to play the guessing game here with Dontavian Wicks or Christian Watson. Next up, we move to the 1 p.m. slate on Sunday, the New York Jumbo Jets at the Miami Dolphins. Now, the Dolphins are like my crazy ex-girlfriend, in my opinion, right? That's how I think of them as a Dolphins fan. Sure, they might be able to suck the life out of your schlong, but they also might stab you to death in your sleep. And as a Dolphins fan, I just keep going back to the well. I just keep crawling on back. I just keep buying back into this. Now, we just got skull-fucked by the Packers. And for some reason, I'm thinking, oh, the Dolphins are going to run the fucking table because I'm an idiot. Now, the Jets are terrible, so they should be able to lay the pipe in this game. The Dolphins beat the shit out of bad teams. That is what the Dolphins do. That is the Dolphins' MO. If the Jets were halfway decent, you know what would happen? The Jets would roll the Dolphins up like a blunt and smoke them. But the Dolphins are playing up against a Jets team that isn't very good. Tyreek was the wide receiver 11 last week in the frozen tundra in Lambeau Field. 6 receptions on 9 targets for 83 yards and a touchdown. Things have gotten better for Reek as of recently, and while I can't scream from the mountaintops that he belongs as a clear top 10 option, I do think you might want to rank him as like the wide receiver 12, so in my opinion, he is a high-end wide receiver 2 for Jalen Waddle away, waddle, till the very next day. He has absolutely reamed us this season. Based on where you drafted him, he has been nothing short of immensely disappointing. Wide receiver 36 last week in Green Bay, 4 for 4 like he was at Wendy's, 453 yards. Now, the game prior, he was the wide receiver 3, so maybe he is on the path to salvation here. He's going to start ripping off some big games, but I honestly don't believe that anyone should be talking about Waddle in any other fashion other than like a bottom-of-the-barrel, low-end start at this point in the season. Now, with so many cooks in the kitchen in Miami, Odell Beckham Jr. has virtually zero value in fantasy on this team. He has not scored more than 5 points a single time on the season, so you definitely want to leave him on waivers. For the Jets, Garrett Wilson has been down tremendous as of recently. 2 straight games outside the top 40, and even with his targets being voluptuous, Garrett Wilson is still struggling. He should see 8 to 10 targets, and the Dolphins' defense really isn't all that great, so I think he could be fine. But again, I don't think anyone is, waking up on Sunday like, hip, hip, hooray, yippee, I can't believe I get to start the Jets players, yeah! No one's thinking that, right? No one's like, wow, I can't wait to play fucking Garrett Wilson this week. Now, could he have a great game because he's a great receiver? Of course, but the offense is just not that good. So Wilson's like a low-end wide receiver, too, that, there's 6 teams on bye, so scrubs like this Garrett Wilson is a scrub, but like, tough situations like this do get elevated. Now, Devontae Adams, the Taco Bell salesman, was the wide receiver 18 last week up against the Seahawks. 5 of 12 for 66 yards and a touchdown. Now, I know Adams and Rodgers really haven't been on the same page this season, but just like Garrett Wilson, he's kind of in that low-end wide receiver 2 range. For Malachi Corley, he might be the wide receiver 3 on this team, but Allen Lazard may be back, and we all know that Allen Lazard kind of just has sneaky good value. But the problem is, the Jets are a sinking ship, and normally Allen Lazard strikes up a big game on primetime. This game's at 1 p.m., so he probably won't do anything if he plays. Next up, we got the revenge game for Kirk Cousins, the Atlanta Falcons at the cold like Minnesota Vikings. Now, Drizzy Drake London played well last week against the Chargers, despite the fact that Kirk Cousins played like a blind man last week. 6 receptions for 86 yards in that game. Now, again, this is a revenge game for Cole's Cash Kirk, so I do believe that up against a defense that allows the highest amount of points to the wide receiver position on a per-game basis, that a guy like Drake London, that's as skilled as Drake London on an offense that wants to throw the rock, he should be able to crack the top 12, and this game could end up being sneaky high scoring, so I got Drake London as a low-end wide receiver 1. Now, Darnell, here comes the Mooney, was a casualty of the Kirk Cousins disaster class last week, 3 of 6 for 20 yards. Now, hopefully, Kirk figures things out and hits the offense with the defibrillator, and they wake up a little bit, they get a little revive, right, and they play better. And that should be able to get Darnell Mooney close to his top 28-ish ways. This week, I got him as a mid-range wide receiver 3. Now, Ray McLeod has been a top 38 wide receiver in back-to-back weeks, but with London, Mooney, Pitts all healthy, playing Ray McLeod is too rich for my blood. For the cold like Minnesota Vikings, this season is going to end up probably being like a big question mark, a big what if for Justin Jefferson. Now, the guy started off the season playing great. Shout out Tony the Tiger, right? 5 of 6 games with a touchdown. Round of applause. But now he has not scored a touchdown in 6 straight games. He ranks 2nd in the National Football League in receiving yards, but he has been colder than an Oreo blizzard as of recent. He has still been fine, right? Even without the touchdowns, he's still okay. but he just hasn't been producing like earlier on in the season. Up against Atlanta, which is a wet dream matchup for wide receivers, I do expect Jefferson to have a big game like we're used to as a top 5 wide receiver. Now, Jordan Addison Ray is one of the poster boys for being a boom or bust wide receiver. You go to the Webster's dictionary, you flip through to the B, you find the boom or bust wide receivers, and a picture of Jordan Addison shows up, right? With the targets coming hefty. As of recently, though, he has been a lot more reliable. Again, not super reliable, but more reliable than we're used to. In a solid spot here, he kind of just feels like a low-end wide receiver 3. For Jalen Nailor, I barely knew her. He has been banished to being a 2-target per week kind of a guy with Hawkinson and with Jordan Addison here, so you cannot play him. Next up, we move to game number 4, the New Orleans Saints going up against the New York Football Giants in MetLife. But before we break down this game in depth at the wide receiver position and the rest of the games on the week, I would like to give you guys a quick word for our friends and our partner over at Underdog. You're brand new to Underdog Fantasy and sign up using promo code Notorious, you'll receive your free pick, which tonight is going to be LeBron James higher than half of a total point plus a first-time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Now, if you are watching this on Thursday or you're watching it after the Lakers game tips off, if you use promo code Notorious or click on the link in the video description, your free pick will be Jordan Love higher than half of a total yard, and you'll also get that first-time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash. You want to match Jordan Love or LeBron James with another player playing in the NFL or in the NBA, and if both of your picks hit, then you will get 3 times what you put in your pick. If you do multiple other picks, they all have to hit, but the payout will increase. So make sure you guys do check out Underdog. They are a great sponsor of the channel. Promo code Notorious, or click on the link in the video description or in the pinned comment to get that free pick plus a first-time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash. So back on into the Saints versus the Giants. Now, this is a game that really isn't the most interesting at the wide receiver position. Now, Marquez Valdes-Scantling has been addicted to scoring touchdowns like Charlie Sheen is addicted to winning over the last 3 games. 4 total touchdowns in that stretch, and at least 1 in every single game. Now, I don't think anyone is sitting there actually excited to play Marquez Valdes-Scantling, since he will probably get like 3 targets, but when a guy is running hot, he's running hot, and he is worthy of a low-end dart throw start in that wide receiver 4 range. For any of the non-MVS wide receivers on the Saints, if you are playing one of them, that is one of the most insane things that a man can do. The rest, or woman, I guess, if you are playing fantasy football as well. This is not just a game for guys, right? There are a lot of girls that play the game, as you can see in the comment section. There'll be a couple of them talking. So I appreciate all of you guys down below in the comment section. If you have any questions, make sure to leave them down below. I try to answer as many questions as possible. But as you guys know, there's a lot of you, which I really do appreciate. So, again, thank you guys so much for the support this season. We're not going to sit here and get all emotional. Oh, thank you guys for all the support, but I do love you guys genuinely, and without you guys, none of this is possible. So shout out to all of you. I really do appreciate you, whether you're brand new or whether you've been watching since I was like 19 years old when I started making these. I'm getting old though, guys. I'm almost 26. The rest of those guys on this team, though, for the Saints, the rest of these receivers should be on like the fucking Hamilton Tiger Cats. So you're going to sit all of them, so you're not playing Kevin Austin Jr. as well. Who the fuck is that guy? Now, Malik Neighbors has been getting force-fed the rock as of recently. Even so, though, he hasn't really done anything special. With Horsecock Drew Lock under center, I am more of a believer. And with the matchup up against the Saints being top 8 matchup for wide receivers in terms of points per game allowed per game, I do believe that Neighbors should be able to finish as a high-end wide receiver too. But again, I won't set the expectations too high because then he's just going to end up screwing the pooch on that. Now, Wan'Dale Robinson had value this season for being a target hog. The thing about Wan'Dale is he doesn't really do a lot with the targets. He just catches them and then falls over. He's not like some yak monster or something. But he hasn't seen as many targets with Lock under center, so I'm just going to stay away from Wan'Dale. And if I'm not going to be interested in Wan'Dale, I'm not going to be interested in the third option on a Drew Lock-led offense. Next up, we got the Carolina Panthers at the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, Adam Thielen stole Flava Flav's necklace and turned back the clock last week up against the Bucs. Wide receiver 6 with 8 catches on 10 targets for 99 yards and a touchdown. Now he faces an Eagles defense that is playing very, very, very well, and they do allow the 4th fewest amount of points to wide receivers on a per-game basis, so I won't just hop on my high horse here and bang the drum from. For Adam Thielen, he is a lower end start on the week in that wide receiver 4 range. He should be able to be fine due to the amount of volume that he receives, but I definitely wouldn't be expecting anything close to what we saw last week. Then we have the other receivers, right? Xavier, somebody touch him, I Leggett, is probably good to get you like 9 to 11 points, but with Thielen sucking in the targets with the efficiency that Haley Welch sucks wang, hawk to spit on that thing, I will not be starting him. David Moore should be able to get like 8+ targets here, but with Thielen playing so well and the team also having Leggett and with the matchup not being the best, I definitely would not play him. For the Philadelphia Eagles, A.J. Brown has been following a pattern over the last 4 games. He was the wide receiver 17 in Dallas, week 10. In week 11, up against the Commanders, he's the wide receiver 36. Week 12, up against the Rams, wide receiver 6. And last week, wide receiver number 35. So based on that pattern, he should show up this week. Now, the matchup also points towards that, so it's not just some fucking like, oh, just, the sun, the moon is in waxing state, so that means A.J. Brown's gonna have a great game, right? It's not some bullshit like that. It's, A.J. Brown's really good, so this is a good matchup. I got him as a top 6 receiver. Now, Devontae Smith has been dealing with a hamstring injury and missed 2 past. Despite teasing us that he might play last week, he hit us with the Dikembe no, and he did not play. When healthy, he's a reliable top 24-ish guy. Coming off the injury, he is in that high-end wide receiver 3 range. Since, his snaps might not come correct, it might not be his normal allotment of snaps, and maybe his play is slightly decreased, so I wouldn't really be super high on Devontae Smith. Jahan Dotson, I'm not even going to waste my time talking about the guy in 2024. No one should even have him on their team. Next up, we got the Cleveland Browns at the Pittsburgh Steelers, a AFC North Division rivalry matchup. Last time out in the snow game, the Browns ended up eating that W. Shout out to famous Jameis Winston. For the Cleveland Browns, in Jerry Jeudy's revenge game up against the Broncos, he put up a career showing. He beat the brakes off the Broncos defense, like what Sean O'Malley did to Cheeto Vera in their second fight. He was the wide receiver 1. He had 9 receptions on 13 targets for 235 yards and a touchdown, with 3 straight games inside the top 20, including a wide receiver 19 performance up against the Steelers last time out, with Jeudy playing red hot. He should be able to finish as a low-end wide receiver 2, even if the matchup on paper doesn't really say that, right? Jameis has really been playing well. Now, Tillman missed practice on Wednesday. Now, it's veteran rest day, but Tillman ain't really a veteran, right? And I don't think that really sounds the best because, dealing with a concussion, he's already missed 1 game. I understand that concussions are impossible to predict a strong timeline about, so, your guess is as good as mine on if he comes back or not. My best guess, though, I'm as much of a doctor as Johnny Sins, is that he wouldn't play. If he returns, he should be the wide receiver 1 or 2 on the team. But with how great Jeudy has looked, he might have fallen down the totem pole to be the wide receiver 2. And with Tillman not being as good as of recently, I would leave him on the bench. If there is no Tillman, Elijah Moore is slightly a sit. And what I mean by that is, if you wanted to make the argument like, Nick, I'd rather play Elijah Moore over Jordan Addison or Jalen Waddle or one of the other guys you're going to say later that's a lower end start, I'm not going to sit there in the comment section and argue back and forth with you, right? I wouldn't end up judging you for that. 2 of his last 3 games, he's been inside the top 15. Seems like everyone has been reinvigorated in this offense with Jameis Winston here. For the Pittsburgh Steelers, George Pickens has been a lot more reliable coming out of the bye week. Outside that snow game, which was up against the Browns, he has been a top 24 receiver in 3 of the other 4 games. Now, I get it is the same matchup here, but the weather shouldn't be playing as much of a factor, if any factor at all. So I do believe that Pickens gets his licks back here as a high-end wide receiver 2. For Calvin Austin and Van Jefferson, they're kind of 2 peas in a pod, right? They're one in the same. They're low target share players that could bust off a reception for a huge touchdown in any given game. Even with Calvin Austin going for the hat trick this week with back-to-back games prior to this week with a touchdown, I definitely just can't do it. I'm going to sit him and Van Jefferson. Next up, we got the Las Vegas Raiders at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, Jacoby has had back-to-back games with 11 or more targets as the wide receiver 7 in week 12 versus Denver, and last week up against the Chiefs in Kansas City on Black Friday, he was the wide receiver 25. over his last 5 games, he has had 3 games inside the top 20. Now, we all know the quarterback situation here isn't the greatest, but without Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers has really elevated himself, so he should be able to be a solid middle-of-the-road, mid-range wide receiver too. Trey Tucker had 1 catch last week for 58 yards and a touchdown, with his targets bouncing so heavily up and down on a weekly basis, bouncing more than Sydney Sweeney's rack when she walks around. Trey Tucker cannot be trusted. Now, with a bunch of injured wide receivers, LSU legend Terrace Marshall should be the wide receiver 3 for the Raiders, and you are not playing the wide receiver 3 in Viva Las Vegas. Now, Mike Evans didn't practice today, and while some of you might panic because of that, he's a veteran. It's Wednesday. Do not worry. Now, if it's Thursday and he doesn't practice, it's Friday, he doesn't practice, wee woo, start to panic. But right now, I'm not worried at all. Magic Mike played last week like he knew he needed to go bananas, Bananas, to reach his usual 1,000-yard mark on the season. He hit the Panthers with a spear like his name was Huskar last week, wide receiver 3, with 8 receptions on 12 targets for 118 yards and a tug. He needs 100 yards basically in each game on the season to reach the 1,000-yard mark, and I expect him to lay a pipe down here to the Raiders this week. Without Chris Godwin, Sterling Shepard, General Shepard himself, feels like the wide receiver 2 in Tampa. He has had 7 targets in back-to-back games, but he had 0 games in that stretch with more than 10 points, so I am not going to be playing him. And Jalen McMillan couldn't catch fucking AIDS if he had sex with Jenna from Forrest Gump, so I'd definitely leave him on waivers. Next up, we got the Jacksonville Jaguars at the Tennessee Titans. I talked about this on the running back video, but this is a game where they should be allowing the guys to wear the color rush old school jerseys. Some Blake Bortles versus Marcus Mariota matchup here. Now, BTJ popped off on the Texans defense as the wide receiver 16 last week. He was 4 of 10 for 76 yards and a touchdown. Now, I want to kind of bring him back down to earth here, right? With Mac Jones under center, trying to pump up this guy's tires would be stupid, even if I think that Brian Thomas Jr. is the best rookie in the NFL right now at the wide receiver position. The matchup here isn't the best, matched with no Trevor Lawrence, knocks BTJ from being like this top 24-ish guy into being a mid-range wide receiver 3, which sucks because obviously if Trevor Lawrence was healthy, you would feel a lot more confident. Now, Parker Washington went off on the main stage like his name was Optic Scumpy last week. 6 receptions on 12 targets for 103 yards and a touchdown as the wide receiver 5. This is a classic situation of a blind squirrel finds a nut every once in a while, right? Of a broken clock is right twice a day. He will come back down to earth. You better believe it. In this game. Now, Devin Duvernay, nay, the horseman, is not even on my radar, baby. You're sitting him down for the Titans while Nick Westbrook-Ikhine was dicking the defenses down like his name has been Jason Love over the last couple of weeks. Especially last week, Alvin Ridley was watching in the corner. 2 receptions on 7 targets for 45 yards. This matchup is too mouth-watering for me to panic, though. I expect Ridley to have a real strong showing. Even if his last 3 games really haven't been the best, I do think that Ridley will be able to finish as a high-end wide receiver 2 up against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, Nick Westbrook-Ikhine deserves his flowers. Like, he's the winner of The Bachelor or Bachelorette. Now, I don't actually know which show is the one where the guy would be the winner. The Bachelorette? I don't know. I do kind of like those corny dating shows, but not that one. I never got into that one. Now, last week, right, he's been a top 24 receiver in 3 straight games. Last week in Washington, in a game where the Titans got fucked like they were in a brasser scene, Nick Westbrook-Ikhine was the wide receiver 8 with 3 catches on 8 targets for 61 yards and not 1 but 2 touchdowns in that game. Now, over the last 8 weeks, he has scored a touchdown or more in 7 of 8 games and 8 total touchdowns in that stretch. I expect him to stretch out the Jaguars defense that allows the 3rd most amount of points to wide receivers on a per-game basis, while the risk is there because of 1, Will Levis, or 2, Nick Westbrook-Ikhine doesn't really have this long laundry list CVS receipt of history of being this great receiver in the NFL, but he has looked good. I got him as a high-end wide receiver 3. Tyler, yeah, Boyd is the wide receiver 3 on a Will Levis offense. So that sentence alone should scare you away. Next up, we got the Seattle Seahawks at the Arizona Cardinals, the start of the 4 p.m. slate. Now, Jackson Smith-Njigba's flame was put out last week, like the end of a Survivor episode. Sure, he was fine last week, but prior to last week, he was fine last week. I don't know if I said he was fine last week, but prior to last week, so he was fine last week, right? It wasn't a complete and utter disaster, but it wasn't as good as what we've come accustomed to, right? Because prior to that game, he was a top 13 wide receiver in the prior 3 games. Last time he faced Arizona, he was the wide receiver 13 back in week 12. So while, he did have one down game, I'm not ready to completely abandon ship, give up on him. I like him as a high-end wide receiver 2 up against a underrated Cardinals defense. Now, DK Metcalf has been no bueno ever since returning from injury. Wide receiver 28 in San Francisco back in week 11. Up against the Cards, he was the wide receiver 35. And then last week, wide receiver 39 in New Jersey up against the Jets. Metcalf's another one of those guys that, he has that big game inside of him, but he just hasn't been so good as of recently. So he can't be ranked inside the top 10. He can't be ranked inside the top 12. He can't be ranked inside the top 18. He's more of a low-end wide receiver 2 to high-end wide receiver 3. Now, Tyler Lockett in my pocket skirt. I'm going to regurgitate the exact same thing I've been saying for like a month straight. With the emergence of JSN in this offense, Tyler Lockett's value is plummeted quicker than a meme token, so there is no need to play him. For Marvin Harrison Jr., he has been incredibly frustrating, right? It's like you had a rough night, you couldn't really sleep, you wake up in the morning, and the second you get up, you go to walk into the bathroom, you just stub your toe right in the morning, and it's like, wow, today is going to be a bad day. It's like the worst possible scenario. You didn't sleep, now your toe's stubbed. The only worst thing that could happen is you go to sit down and take a dump, right, and a snake comes up and bites you in the ass, right? Does anyone else get nervous? I watched a video on Twitter like 3 years ago of a guy that had a snake coming out of his toilet. And ever since then, I always, like, before I sit down, I'm like, oh, is there a snake in this toilet? Is there a snake in my boot? Shout out to Woody. Even though that's not going to happen, it's just like a stupid fear that I have. I don't know. A lot of people probably have stupid fears like that. Probably not the same thing I'm thinking of, but now maybe I just scared a lot of you guys. They're like, wow, there's a video of a snake coming out the toilet. Yeah. He's been, not good. Marvin Harrison Jr. It's been not fun, right? He's basically like rolling a 20-sided die in Dungeons & Dragons. If any of you non-virgins have never played Dungeons & Dragons, it's actually pretty fun. Now, in that game, right, you roll a 20-sided die, right? And maybe you need to roll a 15 to be able to fucking hit a 360 no-scope like her name was Kyler Murray off the top of Rust, right? To take out the boss, right? The evil guy, whatever you want to call it. You need to roll a 15 or better, right, for Marvin Harrison Jr. to actually show up. Now, last time out up against Seattle, he shit the bed. He didn't piss the bed. He pissed and shit the bed. It was terrible. But with 6 teams on bye, Harrison's ranking is inflated as a low-end wide receiver 2. Michael Wilson did see 7 targets last week, but he only had 5 catches for 55 yards, with him more than likely going back to his usual 3 to 4 targets. I will not be starting him. Greg Dortch might have that short guy to short guy, midget to midget connection, shout out to Wee Man, with Kyler Murray, but it hasn't worked out as of recently. He hasn't finished inside the top 34 once this season, so stay clear away. Next up, we got the Buffalo Bills at the Los Angeles Rams. Now, for no one circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills wide receiver, Khalil Shakira, oh baby, when you talk like that, you make a woman go mad, was on the struggle bus in the snow matchup last week up against the Niners, 4 of 7 for 30 yards. Now, before that game, he was a top 25 wide receiver in 4 of the last 5 games. So with the Rams defense not being the best, this does have all the makings of a much better showing out of Bills receiver Khalil Shakir. And with him getting 7+ targets as a norm at this point in the season, Shakir is a great high-end wide receiver 3. Now, I know a lot of people are gonna jump on the bandwagon of Amari Cooper this week because he's been back now for 2 straight games, but he hasn't been playing great. and he hasn't been playing anywhere near the amount of snaps that I would want him to be playing for me to actually want to play him. He's been kind of stagnant around the 50% mark since returning, and you don't want that. You want him playing more snaps than that to actually feel confidence in him. Now, sure, that was an awesome play with the Josh Allen touchdown, but ultimately, I just don't trust him enough just yet, especially with Keon Coleman potentially coming back into the lineup. Now, Keon missed last week with the wrist and was limited in practice on Wednesday. He has now missed the past 3 games. They will probably end up not throwing him out there for his normal workload, his normal snap share, which what we've gotten used to is around 70%. It probably won't be that mark, and for that reason, I am out. Shout out to Mark Cuban. For the Rams, Puka Nacua has been shining like a star in Mario Kart ever since returning from his injury. Outside of the game where he and the Seahawks defender ended up having a fucking boxing match. If you guys remember that game, him and a Seahawks player had a fucking Hulk Hogan versus Dwayne The Rock Johnson match, brother. John Cena versus The Undertaker in a spit-swapping make-out match, brother. Have you guys seen that old school video? It's like a radio call where this guy calls like this lady about the WWE, and it's like a prank call, obviously. He's like, oh, are you interested in the WWE? And she's like, no one in this house watches the WWE. It's not allowed, right? He just keeps calling. The lady, everyone's definitely seen this good one. And eventually towards the end, he calls again, and she's like, I'm fucking tired of you fucking calling my phone every fucking 5 seconds. I fucking hate that. Don't ever fucking call me again, you fucking cocksucker. And then the guy's like, oh, this is a call about the Marine Corps. Do you support the Marines? And she's like, oh, I'm so sorry. All this stuff, blah, blah, blah. And then the guy's like, well, you can help support a local Marine this Sunday night in WrestleMania. If you've not seen the video, I know that was like a shitty retelling of the video because the video is like 6 minutes long. It's so fucking funny. The only video that ever made me laugh like that, which is just like a random internet video, I'm pretty sure this one was fake though, is the one where the guy is calling like 911 and they're like, what's wrong? And he's like, my dick is stuck in the garbage dispose aisle. It's like, blood is everywhere. Now, maybe some of you guys don't find that funny. I saw that video when I was like 12 or 13. I thought that was hilarious. I still think it's funny. Just like the John Cena video. I still think that's funny. But yeah, so Puka and the Seahawks defender put up their Dukes 1v1 fucking boxing match, and then Puka gets ejected, right? He has a bad game there because he got ejected. But prior to that, he was looking real nicey, and once after he came back from that, he's been looking real good. I know, Nick, the Bills' defense is solid, I know. I can't really make any argument to drop Puka outside the top 12, and for me, he is a top 8 wide receiver. Now, while Puka had his fun up against the Saints last week, he had a solid game. Cooper Kupp did not. He was the wide receiver 74 with 3 receptions on 6 targets for 17 yards. Prior to that game, though, he was a top 18 wide receiver in 4 games in a row, so no need to panic on him. Just like Puka, he's a top 8 wide receiver. Now, Demarcus Robinson was fast on and off the field last week. Bro put up a DUI and a touchdown in the same week. You would almost think the guy went to college at Georgia. Demarcus is one of those 3 to 4 target per week type of guys who could always score a touchdown. But with Puka and Kupp on the same team, and with Kyren getting so many touches, I can't really make a good argument to play him, especially with this matchup, so that's a sit for me. Next up, we got the Chicago Bears at the San Francisco 49ers, the penultimate matchup before the 2 primetime games. For the Chicago Bears, wiki, DJ Moore is a start. With Eberflus now out of town, and with Shane Waldron gone over the last few games, DJ Moore has looked like the guy that I thought he was going to be coming into the season. Now, all summer, I gave DJ Moore the Gawk 9000 special, and it is now finally coming to fruition. Back-to-back games as a top 7 wide receiver, and in back-to-back games now with a touchdown. While the end of the game was a disgrace to the game of football for the Bears, that was not Moore's fault, who was a 8 of 16 in that game. 8 receptions on 16 targets for 97 yards and a touchdown in Detroit. With how hot Moore has been running, I got him as a mid-range wide receiver too. While DJ Moore has been hotter than Becca in Superbad, he was one of my crushes as a kid. I don't know when I first saw that movie, but that movie's fucking funny. if you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. My back just so happens to be located on my cock. Shout out Jonah Hill. Keenan Allen has been even hotter. Back-to-back games inside the top 5. Wide receiver 4 last week with 5 receptions on 8 targets for 73 yards and 2 touchdowns. Still got it, baby. He is a mid-range wide receiver 2 on the week for me, behind Mr. Wiki DJ Moore. Now, even with the targets coming Adunze's way, he just really hasn't put up great fantasy numbers. And with DJ and Keenan Allen playing so well, I don't really feel a need to start him as of right now. For the 49ers, Juwan Jennings has been in a dry spell over the last 2 weeks. The team was frozen in Buffalo like Anna and Elsa last week, with Purdy hopefully being healthier and not being impacted by the snow. I do like Jennings' chances to bounce back in what could be a high-scoring game. The matchup on paper isn't the best, as the Bears allow the 3rd fewest points per game to wide receivers, so I would kind of temper my expectations here. So not going to get too excited. He's just in that high-end wide receiver 3 range. While Jennings has been in that dry spell, Debo has been even worse. 3 straight games outside the top 55 for Debo. Now, we all know deep down any given game, Debo can drop a 30 bomb, but with how terrible he's been, he's a desperation start in the wide receiver 4 range. Slick Ricky Pearsall hasn't caught a pass since week 10, so you got to sit him. Next up, we move to, cause you waited all day for Sunday night, the Los Angeles Chargers at the Kansas City Chiefs and the refs. Ladd McConkey has turned it up, turn things up as of recently. 3 straight games inside of the top 20. Last week in Atlanta, Hotlanta, he was balls deep in the defense. 9 receptions on 12 targets for 117 yards. If Ladd could just score more touchdowns, then man, oh man, this would be a guy we'd be talking about inside the top 12 for a majority of games. But sadly, the facts are the facts. He has played in every game this season and has only 4 touchdowns and hasn't scored since week 8, with the Chiefs defense being middle of the road up against wide receivers in terms of points per game finish. I feel good about a low-end wide receiver to high-end wide receiver, or low-end wide receiver 1 to high-end wide receiver 2 finish again. He is a corked-up white boy with a little bit of swag, but I do need him to get more touchdowns to truly be a believer. For Quentin Johnston, he ran real nice from weeks 9 through 11, but that run has ended. That run is over. He has been colder than the East Antarctic Plateau as of recently. Back-to-back games with fewer than 4 fantasy points. The bounce back could occur here, but for a guy who can't catch a common cold, he belongs on the bench. Even with QJ being so bad that it's almost laughable, Palmer isn't elevating either, so Joshua Palmer, who hasn't scored over 10 points since week 9, is a big fat sit. For the Chiefs, to describe DeAndre Hopkins in one word as a Kansas City Chief would be fine, right? Is he as good as we would have hoped? Fuck no, baby. But does he look halfway into the retirement home? No. Last week, he was the wide receiver 29 up against the Raiders with 4 catches on 9 targets for 90 yards, with the Chiefs really struggling and with the Chargers defense not being straight cheeks. Shout out to Elena Croft. Hopkins is a middle-of-the-road wide receiver 3/flex option. Xavier Worthy is another one of those guys, right? The poster boys for the boom or bust player. He's like spinning a mystery box in Call of Duty, right? Sometimes you spin around the box, you shoot it, you teabag, you spin again, you shoot it, and you get a ray gun. Sometimes you follow the exact same steps, and they fist you in the ass, and you get a pistol. Back-to-back pistol games for him as the wide receiver 41 and 42. Sure, the upside is there, but even with so many teams on bye, the good games are too far and few in between for me to actually play him. Corvette, Juju Smith-Schuster with Hopkins in town. This guy's about as useful as using a condom to crank off, so sit him down. Final game here, the Cincinnati Bengals at the Dallas Cowboys on Monday Night Football. Now, Jamar Chase has been the cat's pajamas over the last 3 games, 3 straight inside of the top 10, and he is currently playing like the best wide receiver in the NFL. 6 receptions on 9 targets, 6 of 9. Very nice, I like, for 86 yards and a touchdown up against the Steel Curtain last week. And while the Cowboys defense has looked better as of recent, I expect Chase and Higgins to form form an Eiffel Tower over that defense like what Turtle and Johnny Drama did to that chick at Sundance. So Jamar Chase is a top 3 wide receiver for me on the week, and as of right now, he is my wide receiver number 1 for T. Higgins. Ever since returning from injury, T. Higgins has been a top 18 wide receiver in back-to-back games with a touchdown and 10 or more targets in each game, with Joe Burrow playing some incredible football and the offense looking like one of the best across the league. Higgins is a low-end wide receiver 1 for me. Andre Yoshivas did find the end zone last week, but with Higgins now healthy, I don't trust him at all. I wouldn't be shocked if he only had like 2 targets this game, so you're going to sit him. For the Cowboys, CeeDee Lamb was a complete and utter disgrace. You got mud on your face, you big disgrace. Last week on Thanksgiving, like when your aunt cooks a dry-ass turkey, right? 2 receptions on 6 targets for 39 yards up against the G-Men. With the Bengals defense getting bent over a table like your stepsister on the hub on a weekly basis, I do think the bounce back is crystal clear here. But again, I don't want to get too high on CeeDee Lamb because I could easily get disappointed, but I do think he should be able to finish as a top 12 receiver. Brandon Cooks in his return game, he did find the end zone, but that was really the high point of the game as he was 3 of 7 for 16 yards. With that touchdown, even up against a raggedy Bengals defense, I get Cook could go off. Brandon Cooks could go off. But with Cooper Rush still not looking the best, I don't think anyone really wants to play Brandon Cooks. So I would rather look somewhere else for a receiver instead of playing Brandon Cooks. And then we got Jalen Tolbert. Tolbert's kind of locked into 4 or 5 targets every week. And sure, if he magically busts one off into the end zone, pulls a rabbit out the hat and scores, sure, he'll get 10 points. But if not, he's probably going to get you 4 or 5. And with Cooks back, I am not playing Jalen Tolbert. So thank you guys all so much for watching. If you ended up enjoying, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button down below like it owes you some money. Leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. Check out Underdog if you're watching this video on Thursday. Jordan Love's going to be your free pick, higher than half of a total yard, plus a first-time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash if you're watching before the Lakers game tips off. It's going to be LeBron James, higher than half of a total point. So make sure you guys check that out. Link in the video description or in the pinned comment or by using promo code Notorious when you sign up on Underdog. So I hope you guys did up enjoying. I love you guys more than you'll ever know. I'll see you guys on the live stream tomorrow. There might be a video, might not be, but there's definitely going to be a live stream Thursday at around 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I love you guys more than you'll ever know. Hope you have a great one. And as always, good boy.